Today we're here to speak with Gordon O'Hara.
Good morning.
Gordon, you're not from Florida, although you live in Longwood now. Tell us about how you got from where you started to Longwood.
Okay, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Went to high school in Baton Rouge, and was planning on attending LSU. And my parents were transferred to Nashville, Tennessee. Thus, I moved to Nashville with them and entered Vanderbilt University because there was a big push towards being an engineer in those days, in the 50s. So I was planning on being an engineer. Entered Vanderbilt, found out that I had kind of lost my interest in all the math and the science and physics and whatever, and walked across the street and entered the School of Music at Peabody College in Nashville.
Wow.
And so that's where I went to college, and I was there for 4 years, met my wife Susie there, and she was a music major there at Peabody as well. And we got married when we graduated from Peabody in 1959. And our honeymoon was in Daytona Beach. And so we decided that we wanted to live in Florida after spending a week in Daytona. And so thus we came to Florida, and I got my first job in Orlando at Lockhart Junior High. And that was an interesting story because I didn't realize it. I went to the placements bureau there at Peabody, and they had jobs. One of them I was interested in, I thought, was in Scobie, Montana, until I found it on the map. And it's a step south of the Canadian border, so I'm not a cold weather person, neither is Susie. So we decided to come to Florida. I got the job at Lockhart, and the interesting thing about that job is I didn't realize it, but it was a new school that they had not started to build yet. So I got a job at a school that was not there. And so we did a double deal with the elementary school there, and double sessions. And I taught my first year there in Lockhart, Florida at the elementary school. And then during that year, they built the new junior high there.
Wow, wow. Now, what was your major instrument through that time? And tell me a little about your school experience on that instrument.
Okay, I've been a clarinet player for some years. I started in the 4th grade. My mom was a musician, and I was lucky enough there that she gave me some private lessons before I went to junior high. So I went to Baton Rouge Junior High, having played for about 3 years, and was scared to death to play in the band because I had been playing by myself all those years. But got in the band there. My band director was a jazz trombone player, and he started a Dixieland band, and so I started playing Dixieland music in junior high, then went to the high school, and interesting experience there. Before I went to the high school, they had a very fine dance band in those days, not a jazz band, but a dance band. So I had to have a saxophone to play in that band. And my dad was kind enough to buy me a sax. I bought an alto sax and started playing that about the 7th grade. And so I played clarinet and saxophone going into the high school band, and there I played in the youth orchestra there. I played my saxophone in the dance band, and it was an interesting situation because the band director didn't really rehearse the jazz band. We had a very fine band director, but he said, you guys kind of do this on your own, and I'll buy all the music you want and help you. And we did, and we actually played for the school dances, which is unheard of today, you know. But so I'm basically a clarinet player. Went to Peabody, and thanks to Dr. C.B. Hunt, he saved me because I was it's kind of a jazzer. I'd taken some lessons from a guy in New Orleans who didn't care too much about tone and embouchure, So what happened is that Dr. Hunt straightened me out on the clarinet, and so I'm basically a clarinet player, a saxophone player. Minored on string bass and trombone when I was in college, so that's what I've played all these years.
Wow. Wow. Well, you talked about your first job. Once you had taught a couple of years there, then what?
Started at Lockhart, stayed there for 2 years. I was right down the street from Edgewater High School, where Dale Kiefner was the band director, and he kind of took me under his wing, so to speak. And one of my major problems was that I went to a school of music and didn't study a lot about marching band. I knew that I was going to have to do this sooner or later. As a matter of fact, when I was at Peabody, I went and marched in the Vanderbilt band, which was not a great band, I'll have to admit, but it was an experience in college that most college kids have that I didn't have. That is the marching band experience. And from Lockhart, I've always wanted to direct orchestra. And Howard Junior High opened up in Orlando. And Howard was the old Orlando High School. So it was a large school, downtown school. And in those years was a very good school, had good students and what have you. So I went to Howard and stayed there for 4 years. Had an orchestra, and actually in those days we had a marching band in junior high. So I got the experience, quote unquote, of putting a marching band on the field. However, it was junior high and pretty limited, you know. And from there, Winter Park was a big orchestra, fine arts area, so to speak. So I moved to Glenridge Junior High. Jack Williams was at the high school there, and I had known Jack, and he had a band and orchestra, so we had a fine band and orchestra program at the two schools. And from there, I went to Oak Ridge High School. I taught at Glenridge for about, I think it was 14 years, so I stayed there quite a while. And I went to Oak Ridge High School, and from there, I was interviewed and got the job at Stetson as band director and music education person and so forth and so on. I was there for 5 years, and when I left there, Susie and I moved to Riverview, and I taught at Riverview High School for, I think it was 8 years, and I retired in Sarasota, Florida, Riverview High School. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, how did you get from Sarasota back up here to Longwood?
We couldn't sell our home.
Oh.
we had a very nice home, still to live in, as a matter of fact. And we moved to Sarasota. Susie and I always wanted to live on the beach, in a beach town. Mm-hmm. And we found out when we were in Daytona that's not the greatest place to raise children. And I didn't like the fast track that those kids lived, so we raised our children in Orlando and Seminole County there. And then finally we decided to ship out, pick up everything and go to Sarasota, and left our home here, tried to sell it, but were not successful. So when we retired, we wanted to stay in Sarasota because it was a neat place to live, you know, when you mm-hmm. retire and that sort of thing. And but could not sell our home. The other reason is that both of our boys were in Orlando. And if you know anything about mothers, they want to be with their kids. So I didn't have much choice. I had to take my boat out of the water and bring it to Orlando. And we retired in Orlando. Excuse me.
Well, along the way, with all your different jobs and all your different places to live, you must have had some special challenges. Can you talk about those a bit?
Band-wise, my biggest challenge was marching band. So Del Kiefner, who was a marching band great, in my opinion, helped me there. I just had to learn from my colleagues about marching band. That's all there was to it. And I didn't really need too much help there until I went to high school. And then so that was quite a challenge. One of my greatest challenges as being a band director is being with my family. You get so busy doing things for other people that a lot of us forget our families. And I had a very good friend tell me one day that my family would be there a lot longer than my band performances and all that kind of thing. So concentrate on your family. And then my wife, Susie, has always worked, except when she had our two boys. And so I spent a lot of time, and it was quite a challenge to support her, because you kind of forget about your spouses sometimes. You get so involved. And so that was a challenge, but she's a great lady, and she helped me survive that. So those were basically my my challenges. The one thing that helped me in this business, you had mentioned something about a pivotal experience. I worked with 4 outstanding people in my day, in my early days. First one was Dale Kiefner. The second one was Jack Williams at Winter Park High. The third one was Mark Casey at Boone High School. And for a time when I was at Howard, I actually fed the Boone band. So I got to know him. In fact, I taught all of his kids in my band program, so I got to know him quite well. And working with a gentleman by the name of Joe Kreiness, when I joined the Florida Symphony, this was about, about 1962. When I auditioned for that job and got it, Joe came down from Chicago. So we started in the symphony together, and he was living in Winter Park, and he's a most knowledgeable gentleman, musically speaking, to say the least, and he helped me a great deal with literature and that kind of thing. So those are the people who really helped. Another thing that helped is that I had the luck of playing in the Florida Symphony. I played with them for 26 years. Auxiliary clarinet, bass clarinet, and saxophone, and sitting next to those fine musicians who were all graduates of music school somewhere, and they were prepared to play professionally. And that was a great experience. And then I had the experience of working at Disney for 8 years. I was a sub in the World Band. And the World Band was the band that led the parades down Main Street, down to the castle. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 jobs. We did the parade, basically 3 jobs. We did the retreat to bring the flag down in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And we played big band concerts, which is a big jazz band. And it just so happens where in the Florida Symphony I had these Juilliard, Eastman School of Music, Curtis people to play with. And these were all professional jazz musicians. And I've always enjoyed jazz. So those are the things that really helped me, the most get through all this business.
So the networking is really important. The talking to your colleagues and learning from your colleagues, that's been very important.
Yes, I think listening to your elders as a young director is most important. And I think becoming friends with them, socializing with them, not just, a fellow band director. I think that relationship can mean a lot to the growth of any young director. I think it's wise to get with these people, have them listen to your band, you listen to theirs, direct each other's bands. I mean, I found out that this was very helpful, and rather than being competitive, we were all helpful to each other, one way or the other. We'd get mad at each other once in a while, but nothing that lasted very long. But working with your elders, the one thing that I think is very important that you learn from these people is to be the very best musician you can be. A lot of us back off of the musicianship when we leave college, but that carries over into our teaching, and hopefully we'll share that with our kids to be good musicians. That's what we're after, that kind of thing. So, two other things that I'll mention here. Discipline. You cannot have a fine organization without having strict discipline. You don't have to be a monster, but you have to have discipline. And you can't quit. We get very discouraged, especially around contests. This dates me calling it contest. MPA. I think those were my lowest days in my career, trying to get ready to be judged and that kind of thing. But I think it's wise to never quit. And a director that brings to mind, Keith Ledford is almost blind. And I followed Keith when I went to Oak Ridge High School. He left Oak Ridge, and I saw some of the scores that he used. And some of them were pretty difficult music. And there were markings all over those scores, yellow magic markers, red magic markers, because he couldn't see. But he kept studying and kept working at it and never gave up, and ended up being a very fine teacher, in my opinion. So that's a few words of wisdom, I guess you might call it.
Well, they're great words. Great words. I know that you are a very kind person and a very giving person. Very, very willing to talk to others and help others. What is it about you that has allowed you to assimilate all of this orchestral and band and jazz experience and then put it together to give to your students?
Well, this is really pretty simple to me. I think being positive. We have a tendency to be negative. We criticize. So I think being positive helps kids. I think the kids knowing that we will be helpful when they need assistance. Some band directors walk away from the situation and this is, of course, mostly after school, before school, when we'd like to be at home in our boat or on our horse or something like that, being considerate of the people. And I know many a time I've been sitting in a symphony rehearsal worried about stuff at school and what have you, and here's the conductor glaring at me because I'm not playing better or something like that. So I think being considerate of your kids, you don't know what that child has been through at home before they came to your band room. And so I think being considerate of that sort of thing, I think being honest and sincere, kids know when you're sincere. They really do. If you lie to them, it will get you in the end. So being sincere, I think being professional. I learned this from playing with professional musicians. And I treat my kids as though they're older. I mean, when I taught junior high, we played a lot of high school music. And I told them, you can do this, and so I try to teach very strong fundamentals. I have a real problem now with band directors not teaching kids to count. And it shows up in the sight reading room. You have judged a lot of sight reading, Tina. And the kids aren't taught to count, to feel the pulse, and put these rhythmic patterns on top of these beats. And we say count, but a lot of kids just don't know how to count. They don't know what you're talking about. And so I think teaching strong fundamentals, good tone, basically good musicianship is very important. And the last thing, I have always tried to tell the kids to get individual help. We band directors can help so much. In fact, a friend of mine who is not with us anymore used to, in fact, I replaced him at Riverview High School. His name was Jack Crew, and used to sit down individually with each kid before they went to MPA and made sure that that kid could play his music. Well, that's a hard thing to do if you've got a big program, so private lessons, I sincerely believe that if you want to be good at something, whether it be tennis or horse riding, horsemanship and what have you, that it really helps to study with someone, take some lessons, and do things with your teacher. And so I've always stressed individual help like that.
Wow, that's great advice. Well, I know you believe strongly in listening, both for students and directors. Can you expand on that a bit?
Well, we perform the way we do generally because we've heard our music. And I believe very strongly in listening to recordings. First of all, professional recordings. And that goes for me and it goes for my kids. I bring the recording in to the band room and play it of a fine orchestra. I played many orchestral performances for band kids because there's a sense of musicianship that you get in an orchestra that you don't have in a band, and it's the string section, a very sensitive section of a musical organization that can do some things sometimes that a band can't do. And so I believe in that. I think it's very important to listen to your own recordings, have the kids listen to that, and say, hey, do you hear this is out of tune or this is not together? And they can hear these things. And this really helps. I think enjoying music, teaching the kids to enjoy what they're doing. In fact, it's a joking thing, but it's not so funny. I said, if you don't enjoy music, there's the door. We enjoy playing music and whatever it is. Now, it may not all be great, but we're going to enjoy our performances. So I try to teach high standards of performance. You see on some band room walls, tune or die. Have you ever seen that sign? Well, there's something to that because I've known band directors, especially in beginning band, but other bands too, to never really tune. And they play and they play and they play, and then just before the concert, they'll pass around a tuner and ask everybody to tune to a concert F or a concert B flat. Well, that's the way you find the pitch of your instrument, the basic pitch, but that's not tuning as you're a performer like that. So I have another saying, do it or forget it. I mean, if you're going to do something, we're going to do the very best we can. And if you don't have that attitude, you really need to do something else, basket weaving or volleyball or whatever, But and the final thing I'll say is most of the young kids, I've done a lot of judging, especially middle school, and these young people are frightened of the situation. And it's usually because they don't have a lot of confidence in what they're doing. And as we as teachers need to build that confidence, and this comes through complimenting kids. If you're down on a kid all the time, they're going to be down. So when they do something right, say something about, hey, that's good. That's a good approach to the whole thing. But I think confidence has gotten me through more performances. I always told my kids in sight reading, for instance, I told them, and you've judged my bands before, and I do all the singing and everything, and we sing together and the whole thing, which I think is very important. But I tell them, especially in high school, I might miss del segno, de capo, a repeat, a dynamic change. I may miss that, and when I shut my mouth and ask for questions, tell me what I missed. And this is a two-way trip. We're going to do this thing together. It's not just you, and it's not just me. we're together in this thing. So, and that comes from a group that has a lot of confidence in what they're doing.
Again, great advice. How important is it for directors to keep playing their instrument once they've left college and they have their director's job?
Well, I have a thing about this because I think it just helps you stay in touch. You're telling the kids to do this, that, and the other to get a good sound, have a good embouchure, and whatever, to tune. And I think it's a great thing if you can sit down and play with your kids. We get to the point where we can't, we're not going to sound as good as when we spent an hour or two in a practice room every day because we're helping them. But I think staying on your instrument any way you can, if you can play in a community band, something like that. I've had parents, believe it or not, that got together and played, and I went in and sat in with them. They were, old band folks or orchestra people, and we'd sit down and we'd play, and I thought that was a real interesting experience that I had. But I think it's very important to remember to be a student all of your life. You and I talked about that before we worked on this recording session, and I think it's wise to remember that you're always a student.
Now that you're retired, what are you doing for music? What are you doing for fun?
I still teach privately. I retired in 1993, and so I've been out of the business for over 20 years. And all that time, in fact, I spent my first year thinking that I was going to goof off and fish and work in the yard and whatever, and I couldn't do it. I can't stand television. I can't live my life doing that. So some of the directors asked me to do some private teaching, and I have taught all of those years, 20 some odd years, privately. I'm always available to come hear somebody's band and what I do. I remember how I felt about the third clarinets not being able to play their part as well as the seconds and first. So I walk in there and I take the third clarinets and we go to a room and we play together. And so I help in sectional rehearsals and this kind of thing. So I'm still involved. I'm having problems getting into football stadiums. I cannot get to the press box anymore. But I still enjoy a good halftime show. I do not go to Friday night football games anymore because I've had that. But I do enjoy the halftime. And so I'm still involved, with the kids.
Okay. And you mentioned way back at the beginning of the interview that you met your wife when you were both in college.
Right.
How long have you been married?
55 years.
Well, congratulations.
And in fact, it's kind of interesting because I started teaching when we got out of college. We got married in 1959, and so it's been 55 years, and I've been teaching for 55 years, and so I played my horns about 60 years now that I think about it. But yeah, we've stayed together the whole time, which I tell you what, Tina, I think the family I mentioned, one of my problems through the years is staying with my family and taking care of them, even no matter how busy I got. And I think the family situation is very important. Because, in fact, just recently, some of the kids that I know, and he's a band director, got a divorce. And it hurt him, but it hurt the kids twice as much. And I relate to kids. I think all of us do who work with young people. And I see what it does to them. The girl was in high school, and she kind of survived, but the boy was in middle school. I think he was in the 6th grade, and it destroyed him. So I believe very strongly in the family. So that's where I'm at as far as that's concerned now.
Well, and congratulations on your long-lived marriage and on your strong family. Well, we've come about to the end of our allotted half hour, but we have time for a favorite story if you'd like to tell one.
Well, as a matter of fact, I would. The gentleman that I'm going to talk about very briefly, his name is Richard Thompson. And when I was at Howard Junior High, I had been teaching, about 4 years when I got Richard in class. Beginning band, trumpet player. If he sat in the back of the chair, his feet would not touch the floor. And next to him was a paper bag. And out of the paper bag came his trumpet. And his father bought his trumpet in a filling station. It was hanging in the ceiling of a filling station. He didn't have a case, so his mom gave him a paper bag, and he brought his trumpet to beginning band at Howard Junior High. This kid was pretty withdrawn, hid behind the stand. All of us band directors look back through the band and you see the tops of their head, right? You don't see their face. They're hiding behind the stand. And this was Richard. Well, what it amounted to is that he grew and he finally got his feet down on the floor. By the time he was in the 8th grade, this was junior high in these days, he was my drum major. And when he got into that position, he just blossomed. Something happened to Rick Thompson. He was playing trumpet, had a bad trumpet, and his father was a plumber and didn't really relate at all to what he was doing. However, he convinced his father that music was important because his father used to be a commercial fisherman, and he had boats, and I'm a fisherman, so we fished together. And he got a new boat, and on the back of the boat, he named it the El Capitan.
Oh.
And I told Frank Thompson is his dad's name. I said, "Where'd you get that?" And he said, "My son played the El Capitan March, and I wanted to name my boat after his music, you know." So, wow, that was pretty earth-shaking to me and to Rick. Rick went to Boone High School, was the drum major for Mark Casey at Boone High School, went from there. In fact, he was, during these years, he was also dabbling in art. And when he went to college at South Florida, he decided to be an art major. And right now is the head illustrator for Martin Marietta, or whatever their company is named now. He draws all of the rockets, the planes, the guns that they make.
Wow.
And he does all the illustrations.
All the schematics
he draws
for
it all.
Yeah.
And now, last time I talked to him, we have lunch quite often. He's a very close friend now. By the way, you have to be careful with your kids because they might end up living next door to you one day. And in this case, he's turned out to be a very close friend to the family. And he is doing portraits of generals now. And he not only does the illustrations for Martin Marietta, but they've hired him to do several portraits for generals. And so I sit back and I remember Rick Thompson in that chair in beginning band. And I have to think that band helped him get where he is now.
I'm sure it did.
So that's my story of Richard Thompson.
Wow. And that's a great story.
Thank you.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, and it's time to close out the interview. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your experiences.
Well, thank you, Tina, and I bid you farewell. I hope everybody, I don't know what you're doing right now if you watch this, but if you're preparing for contest or MPA or something like that and are all stressed out, I hope I've said something that might help you here, okay? Take care. Be of good cheer.